Hello, everyone. My name is Mirna, and on behalf of the Mindalia TV team, welcome to Mindalia live streaming, where thousands of people around the world gather daily to see the lectures and interviews organized by Mindalia TV. Today, with us, Angel Rebo, CEO consultant, TV host, international public speaker, and president of the Wisdom for Kids Foundation, is being joined by our dear co-host Judy Hoberman. Judy is the president of Walking on the Glass Floor and Selling in a Skirt. She is an international speaker, trainer, executive coach, author, and radio show host. Before starting with them, we want to remind you that Mindalia's mission is to share information that can help raise the level of consciousness around the world, and you can help us by subscribing to our channel, leaving us a positive comment down this video, or sharing it with someone that you know that is going to benefit of the content that we're going to be talking here today. Also, while we are live streaming, like right now, we have the active chat. It's a screen that you're going to be seeing here on my side or under the video in case that you're following us from a smartphone, and through there you can interact with us, enter your questions. Please follow the format, word question in caps before the actual question. We also want you to collaborate with Mindalia with your own valuable content. And for that, you can go to our website. On the top, you're going to find a link that says Collaborate with Mindalia. That link is going to take you to a form that you can fill out, and our technical team will be getting in contact with you. Remember, you can collaborate with Mindalia in English through Mindalia TV English, in Spanish through Mindalia Televisión, and Portuguese through Mindalia Televisão. We invite you to visit our different platforms, our different channels, Facebook pages, Instagram accounts. Follow us. In that way, you are going to be always updated about the content that is being shared, and you also help us reach as much people as possible in the planet. We're not going to be delaying this any further, and I'm going to leave you with Angel, with Judy, and our very special guest today, Mr. Jeffery Tobias Halter, the president of YWomen. Guys, welcome to Mindalia live streaming. The screen is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mirna, for this wonderful introduction. And welcome back, Judy. Hi, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you.
little chilly here in Dallas.
A little bit. We woke up like with 27, 28, something like that. So we're not used to this. Oh, my God.
Yeah, I know. It's coat weather.
But, you know, every time we have we have a guest, well, the likelihood of that guest coming from north of the U.S., northern than we are, is so easy that they always laugh at us and they say, come on.
Except that our guest today is from Atlanta, so it's really sideways, and he's cold there too, because we already talked about that. So yeah,
okay.
This is a first for us.
Yeah, and you know, as I was preparing the interview and I was reading one of his papers, I was, really thrilled about different concepts. But one of the things that the items that I liked the most was that, you know, he's actually proposing that all organizations that really take, you know, gender equality seriously and diversity in general, they should have this chief diversity officer in place with full, you know, not only with, you know, full responsibility, but also reporting to the CEO. And as you know, Judy, every single week we are here talking with amazing people, and we are discussing of the importance of involving every single culture, every single way of thought that might come from gender or from culture or from race or others into the forefront of the strategy of all the companies to make them more successful and to be able to uncover those additional pockets of profitability in a broader sense. Sorry about the speech, but I was really compelled.
You're setting the stage.
I'm setting the stage. Exactly. So we have something really, really special today, who's been a warrior for all the gender inequality in this world, and in many, not only for women, but for many other avenues. So I would like you to tell us who we have with us today.
Okay, so for this, I'm going to put my glasses on because I don't want to miss one word of this bio. I don't want to wing this. So Here we go. So Jeffery Tobias Halter is our special guest, and just let me say that he is my celebrity crush. I'm just going to put it out there. He's a thought leader on the strategies companies needed to implement to accelerate their commitment to the recruitment, retention, and advancement of women in the workplace. Exactly what we love. Jeffery is a gender strategist and the president of YWomen, a strategic consulting company focused on engaging men in women's leadership issues. YWomen focuses on driving actionable business plans and strategies to help organizations create integrated women's leadership strategies. He's the former director of diversity strategy for Coca-Cola. He's written 2 books, Why Women and Selling to Men, Selling to Women. He writes for numerous publications. He's a 2-time TEDx speaker. His clients include Fortune 500 companies in fields from packaged goods to automotive. And let me just say that as much as all these accolades that Jeffrey has, he's one of the most down-to-earth people. He doesn't talk above you. He doesn't talk below you. He talks to you. And I just find that so refreshing, especially with this topic, because every day, Angel, you and I know there's another article that comes out. So without further ado, let's bring Jeffrey. Hi, Jeffrey.
Hi, Jeffrey.
Good
Welcome.
morning. Thank you for having me on. It's really my pleasure.
Yeah. Well, we're thrilled. We're absolutely thrilled. So, Angel, you want to start us off?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you very much for being with us today. And, you know, on that list of 5 recommendations that you make in this hidden secret document that I was reading about you, there were other 4. And I have to say that this 5th, I pointed it out because it's probably like the most creative and really like, you know, to put this in the forefront of every single strategy. If someone says, if a company says, we're really going for it, you know, this is really a very important move. But the other ones are like more, oh my God, we're still there. We still have to have those things. And I would like maybe to just, you know, throw that question. You know, there's still so many basic things that have to happen as far as gender equality. Why are we still there? Why do you think the human being is still there in the corporate world today?
Yeah, and thank you for having me on. And you know, it's such a fascinating conversation. I've been doing this work now for almost 20 years. And the real challenge is this. There's no one answer. The answer to advancing women or other underrepresented groups is this algorithm of making the business case, getting the organization bought in, having the right culture, 13 different interconnected HR programs and policies, you know, kind of the sausage making that nobody wants to really, you know, poke into. And then it's how do you get senior leadership engaged? You know, we've been talking about this now, literally going back to the 80s. And women have made a lot of progress. But what we don't see is, believe it or not, we've been stalled for the last 10 years. There's really this great core of women just sitting below the C-suite. But what I've been talking about lately is that women are now beyond the tipping point. This is not a conversation that can be ignored any longer. And quite frankly, the numbers are just overwhelming. If you're a business leader and you don't understand this and understand how to talk to your organization and your teams, you're really risking being the next Sears, the next Blockbuster. It's, you know, if you don't understand diversity, inclusion, women, it's a going out of business strategy. And yet today, out of the Fortune 500, there's probably 400 companies that really don't have a strategic plan. We have a lot of different programs out there, but so many of these programs focus on what I call fix the women strategies. Mm-hmm. And what that is, you know what they are. They're employee resource groups. They're headed by a bunch of volunteers who just do yeoman's work, women's work. And yet the numbers don't move. And so just picture this, you know, you're a business leader. You're going to go do a $2 billion M&A project. And so I'm going to give this to 30 well-meaning volunteers and not give them any money or resources. And then when it fails, you wonder why. Well, this is exactly how most companies treat their women's leadership issues. There's no strategic plan. There's no funding. And then we wonder why we're stuck and why progress hasn't been made. And the statistics just continue to be jaw-dropping. There's a great McKinsey article just came out that said 78% of business leaders believe the business case for women and diversity is rock solid. And yet only 15% can actually talk about it or hold their leaders accountable. Now think about that. I was in sales for 20 years before I started doing this work. If women's leadership advancement was a sales curve, every CEO in the country should have been fired 20 years ago, because it's just not acceptable. So I'll pause here because I get a little wound up on this topic. But what's the business case? How do you talk about it? How do you hold people accountable? How do you treat it like any other business priority?
Well, here's one thing that I did find. I was doing a lot of research about diversity and inclusion and bringing women in. And a lot of companies truly don't put women in diversity and inclusion. And I've gone to conferences thinking, wow, this is going to be great because it's going to have something about women. And there aren't. One of the ones that surprised me the most was that the whole diversity and inclusion conference was all about veterans, which I didn't realize was part of that. But women aren't always part of that conversation. And it's almost like putting sales and marketing together, like you mush them together and eventually something comes out. So I agree with you that there's not really the business case, but Angel and I were talking to somebody and they said specifically, it's not a women's issue, it's a business issue. So do you agree that we have to make sure that the CEOs and the decision makers are understanding that this has a lot to do with their bottom line and their business?
Well, here's the funny part, and you're spot on, Judy, but think about this, right? If you look at the Fortune 500, probably half of them are B2C companies, which says women buy or influence 83% of their products. And yet most of these companies are still led by men. This makes no sense. And the practical nature of this buy or influence is so critical. Whether you look at healthcare as an example. Healthcare today is a women's issue. She's managing her own health, her parents' health, the health of her family. She's the home healthcare manager.
Right.
Let's look at cars. Women buy or influence 70% of the cars bought in this country. And one of the stories I like to tell in my workshops is that in 125 years, and with all due respect to Mary Barra, how has the auto industry not figured out what to do with a woman's purse? Because you put it on the passenger side seat, and every time you hit your brakes, your entire world goes spilling out in front of you, right? This is a pretty easy fix. And we could go on and on and on. But here's the interesting part that I'm finding, and that is B2B is sitting up and taking notice. And what we're feeling is this war for talent that we have been preaching and talking about for 15 years. And I'll give you a couple stories. I attended a conference, the Awesome Women of Supply Chain, and it was down in Florida, 600 women from supply chain, and they're talking about business issues. Oh, and lo and behold, did you know we need 100,000 truck drivers today in this country? Nothing moves without trucks. 3 weeks later, I'm at the groundbreaking Women of Construction in San Francisco. We need 300,000 skilled laborers in this country, iron workers, welders, pipe fitters, plumbers. And then I got to go to the big IBM Think conference. So this is IBM and all their customers. Well, come to find out, we need 400,000 people today in cybersecurity. And you have to be a US-born citizen. And so there just aren't enough bodies today to fill all of the needs. And it doesn't matter the industry. And here's the jaw-dropping statistic that is keeping CEOs up. 10,000 boomers a day are leaving the workforce. So that says 3.65 million people are retiring. And only 1 million college graduated people are entering the workforce. And so if you need a bright, educated workforce, you're not even replacing the talent that's leaving your company. And then we start to talk about cybersecurity, biotech, genetic engineering, these hot growth fields. I work with a number of pharma companies. And I was talking to a divisional president. He's a scientist. He said, I have 16 openings right now for organic chemists. And we go and recruit at the best schools. And you know what? We'll maybe get 3 of them. And it's not just money. Millennials want culture. They want inclusion. They want everything that we've been talking about. And so these dynamics are really causing pain.
Right, but now take that one step further, because with millennials, I agree, there's certain things that they look for, but remember that we also aren't giving the training that is so vital to the millennials and encouraging them to take these positions. We're looking at, and we're also missing the talent that's already in the talent pool in some of these companies that are, maybe not millennials, but maybe, and they're not boomers, but they're in the middle, and they're, so why are we not taking this untapped talent and incorporating that?
And that's a great question. And I'm actually, part of my work is also kind of embracing a business historian role. And so here's a fascinating topic that no one talks about. The first thing we cut in 2008, in addition to half the people, was most of the training budgets. And we have never replaced that. We've continued to drive double-digit operating profit by getting more and more work done with fewer resources and fewer people. Well, now, over 10 years later, we've got an entire group of let's call that rising VP level managers who have had 0 leadership development in the last 10 years. Oh, by the way, they're managing a more diverse workforce. It's a 24/7 demand, and there's no let up in sight. And so if you're not developing your own people,
right,
what are you going to do? You're going to have to buy from the outside. And this gets back to the company reputation piece, that if you don't have a good company reputation, millennials aren't going to come to work for you. Women aren't going to come to work for you. Hell, old white guys aren't going to come to work for you. And so this notion of company reputation is also the iceberg that's keeping CEOs up at night, and none of them are talking about it. And it's just the impact of social media. Let's take one example, Starbucks, right? If you had asked me a great company for diversity and inclusion, I would have said Starbucks. And what we witnessed a year ago was a bad manager having a bad day. And you're going to be front page news. And millennials and social media, there are no secrets. Everything that goes on in your company, you better be ready to read about it in the Wall Street Journal. And we got to look no further than Uber. Citi came out about a month ago. I don't know if your listeners saw this, but they said, we do not have gender pay equity, and we are calling ourselves on this, and we are going to fix this. But if you're a CEO today, if you think there's any secrets, if the Me Too movement has taught us anything, millennials are not going to call HR. They're going to go to the front page of the paper, and then you're playing defense.
Right.
And shame on you as a CEO if you haven't taken action well ahead of that course of action.
Yeah, and Angel, you and I, we've talked a lot about being proactive instead of reactive. And this is a perfect example, with all the people that they're trying to push into these leadership roles.
Absolutely. And I was going to ask you, what do you see today? Because you mentioned, I loved when you explained the different kinds of conferences that you attended, because they're so different but so equal, right? I mean, you're comparing, construction with supply chain and with IBM and cybersecurity. What do you see today? So you said CEOs are not really, saying aloud, we have this issue, but that's something still that it's concerning for them. What do you see the main consequences? What's happening today? Is profitability going down, or are we going to see due to the lack of paying attention to this, and also to the lack of not training these middle layers of management? Are we starting to see consequences in profitability or in other, KPIs in the corporate world?
here's what's really interesting. The numbers are overwhelming if you do this well. So the McKinsey report that I referenced earlier around the business case talked about and gave very specific numbers. And I want to read my notes so that I get this perfectly right. But this is McKinsey. This is incredibly credible information. Over 500 companies based on two measures of financial performance: profitability measured as average EBITDA margin and value creation measured by economic profit margin. Companies in the top quartile for gender diversity were 21% more likely to outperform on profitability, 27% more likely to have superior value creation. Companies in the top quartile for ethnic diversity are 33% more likely to have industry-leading profitability. The numbers are overwhelming if you track it. But here's the fascinating piece of the research. You either get it or you don't. And if you don't, a penalty exists. Companies in the bottom quartile for both gender and ethnic diversity are 29% less likely to achieve above average profitability. And this is the first time there's been any research talking about the penalty, the downside. We've always intuitively known when you have diverse teams, diverse organizations, you're going to get better results.
Right.
I love this notion that if you don't do it, there's a penalty, and it hits your bottom line, and it hits your bottom line. So that's where smart companies are figuring this out.
And do you see what would you say? Are you typically, those three different examples of conferences you mentioned before, would you say that they hired you to go there and talk to their people for any specific reason?
Here's what's fascinating. I was just talking to Judy about this before we got on the call. I was on the road almost 30 weeks last year, and I largely go to something you would not envision, which is a lot of women's conferences. And what's fascinating is men are showing up. Mm-hmm. Smart men are showing up. I'm not putting myself in that category, but what I'm telling you is at a conference of 600 women, you'll see 75 men there who want to get better at this. They want to know what advocacy looks like. I actually believe in most organizations, and this is just my causal data, I think 30% of men are ready to be advocates, but we don't know what it looks like on a daily basis. And I think another 50% are ready to get on board if the company says it's important, if they see their boss modeling this behavior. And then, I'm going to be totally honest. 20% of the men are never going to get this.
Right.
And yet, isn't that where we put all our training on the 20% that don't get it?
Yeah.
And there's, there's another phenomenon that companies are kind of falling back on, and that's this notion of, no, these are unconscious bias, and you need to do unconscious bias training. I'm going to tell you, when you look at your numbers and you don't have women in parity roles top to bottom, it's not unconscious bias. That's mindful blindness. And you are making decisions based on talent not being available because you haven't groomed it. I'm a big believer, one of the HR strategies is diverse panels. So ensuring you have, at least one of the candidates, even the NFL has adopted this, even one of the candidates is a woman or a person of color. And I often get the pushback, well, we don't have any ready. And my question back is, why don't you have any ready, Jim? Are you saying you don't have the skill to develop people unlike yourself? And if so, why do I have you in this organization? Those are the tough questions CEOs got to ask. Not, why are we looking at three incumbents? So what are you doing to get ready? And yeah, go ahead, Judy.
No, I was just going to say, when you were saying that 30% of the men really do want to be advocates, they don't know how. I was at a conference, and at the very end, there was a gentleman in the back. It was probably 60-40 female male. There was a man in the back, and he asked if he could ask me a personal question. And you know as well as I do, you got to be really careful with personal questions. But I thought, okay, whatever. And so he said to me, you talk a lot about men that want to champion women. How do we do it? Just like that. And you could see all the other men looking around going, oh, shoot, somebody asked that question.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. That's a big thing. But the other thing I want to ask is, you as a man who has such a great reputation for being invited to all these women's conferences and having these great conversations, what moved you into that direction? Why are you such a big proponent and advocate and a champion and every other word for women? Because that's the big question. And I know when people watch this, they're going to say, okay, but he's a guy, so why?
Yeah, it's so funny you say that. There was not one thing. There were a number of factors that really led to this. As I mentioned early on, I'm a sales guy. I was in sales and sales management with Procter & Gamble and Coca-Cola for 20 years. I was actually working in sales training, and Coca-Cola went through a massive restructure. They laid off 8,000 people, and they settled a $200 million discrimination lawsuit that should never have taken place, but it did. Long story short, I get assigned to run diversity education in 2001. And I'm a straight white guy. And I have to tell you, I honestly thought I got the short straw, that I was being punished for being given this assignment. I didn't know what I did wrong. Quite frankly, I was happy to have a job because I have a wife and a mortgage and family. And so I went into my own program on a daily basis and was a hostage, just like all the other people there, because they knew of the lawsuit and they didn't want to be there. But an interesting thing happened. I heard stories from people that I knew about the experiences they were having. And I heard stories from women, and I heard stories from people of color and different sexual orientations. And I had what they call a white male epiphany, where you realize what privilege is, and you're always the default gender or race in a meeting. And so I chose to get curious. This topic was really of an interest to me because I loved the company. I loved working at the company. And to hear that my best friends were having significantly different experiences than I was caused me to pause. And so this was at the same time that Tom Peters had come out with Reimagine. And Tom and his, I'm a huge fan of his. And he just wailed on companies around the business case for women and what talent is going to look like in the next 10 years. And this gave me another epiphany. And it was this notion that we never make the business case for diversity and inclusion. This was 15 years ago. And so I had this idea, and it led me to write my first book. Because this was very early on when Deborah Tannen was talking about gender communication in the workforce. And I said, oh my gosh, in all my years of sales training, we've never trained men how to sell to women or women how to sell to men. And this is actually when you and I crossed paths about 15 years ago. And so I wrote my first book called Selling to Men, Selling to Women, to teach men how to sell to women. And from there, it just grabbed me. And I became immersed in the topic. I saw it as such an opportunity for businesses. My background was a perfect fit. And it actually becomes contagious. And this is where, going back to your point about running into men at conferences, if there's one takeaway of this webinar, and take a man to a woman's conference, and the higher they are in the organization, the better. Because what they're going to find out is even the highest ranking CEOs are going to walk into a room of 1,200 women and be intimidated. It's like the first time a man walks into a baby shower or a bridal shower. And you'll see this deer in the headlights look. And I don't care how high you are in the organization. And I do this a lot. I drag men to women's conferences. And I let them sit in that discomfort. And then I say, what's going on? And they said, wow, this is a little intimidating. I said, why is that? He said, well, you know, we're the only men here. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's how women feel every day in meetings in our company. And you just get this light bulb moment. And then you hear speakers talking about the business, talking about driving results around leadership development. There's always amazing motivational speakers. Mm-hmm. This immersion changes people. And so it's critical that we drag men to this event. And so that starts to answer that question.
Interesting.
I'd actually like to circle back on something that Angel talked about is what are the barriers? You know, why don't we have more men? And then how do we, to answer your question, how do we engage men? How do we get them to come in? Mm-hmm. What I find today is there are 4 barriers that are holding back men from being advocates. And they are apathy, empathy, accountability, and fear. So what do I mean by that? Apathy says I don't see or understand the issue. I don't believe men and women are having different experiences in the workplace. Empathy is help me understand really what you feel. I'm just not getting it, right? It's apathy, but it's at a deeper level. And so that comes from connecting and learning. Accountability, we already talked about this. If it's not important to my boss or my paycheck, why is it important to me? And then the last one is fear. Mm-hmm. And men are scared to death that we will say or do the wrong thing. And so I can have a very long, comfortable career without ever addressing the issues of diversity and inclusion. But yet that's not what leadership is. Leadership is taking it on. And then there's another fear called the man code. And that is by even doing this women's work, this diversity work, I'm being judged by my peer group. And we don't have to look any farther than the recent Gillette ad to see polarizing sides of a concept that we know takes place. Now, I don't love the word male toxicity, but we certainly know what the man code looks like in the workplace. I was an enforcer of the man code for 15 years of my career. I get that. So how do we solve these? Apathy, you solve by learning. Learn the business case. Learn why this is so important. Empathy, we solve by listening. I have one simple request for men. Take a woman to coffee and ask her a simple question. Tell me what I don't understand. What experience are you having that I'm not? And oh, by the way, Janet's not going to tell you. Janet does not want to be the flag bearer for all things women. Mm-hmm. Listen, be quiet and ask her again, what don't I understand? And Janet will start to loosen up. And don't justify, you know, when she raises an issue, say, oh, you know, we got a policy on that. Just shut up and listen. And then ask a third time. And in that third time, you're going to hear root cause issues that exist in your company that you did not even know about. And I'll give you an example of this. I do work for a major pharma company. I do a day-long session for 35 men, and we spend 7 hours talking about how to become advocates for women. And it's fascinating. And I made the comment that women's voices are talked over or their ideas are ignored 5 to 10 times a day. I got a call 2 months after this session. This gentleman was a senior scientist. He said, Jeff, you made that statement and I didn't believe you. I need data and research. And so I went back to my staff meeting. And every time a woman's idea was ignored or her voice talked over, I just put down a tally sheet. And when I reached 20 occurrences, I knew we had a problem. And I have now implemented new staff meeting roles. And this was his epiphany moment. So that's how we drive people. Leading, this notion of accountability, that's where leadership comes in. This is when leaders ask tough questions. Why aren't there women ready for this next job? What does your succession slate look like? What are your plans? Why did we lose Janet? What are your regrettable losses? And then the last one is fear. And fear is very real. And the way that I have found to overcome fear is you just have to have the will. You have to have the will. And whether that's diet and exercise or advocating for women, I have found the will comes from a personal connection. Much like me sitting in class listening to people and hearing their stories, I have found men who are ready to be advocates, true advocates, either were raised by maybe a working mom, maybe their spouse works, they have a sister, but the men who really get this are fathers of daughters. And when I say that, I don't mean that to be a guilt-ridden statement. But I'm a boomer. I'm a great example. And I tell this story on myself. I wanted to raise a strong daughter. I made sure, I supported her, whether that was music or soccer. I made sure my daughter went to a great college. And when my daughter graduates and makes 87 cents to my son, I choose to do nothing. When my daughter goes to work for Ron down the hall, who I know is a sexist, I choose not to address Ron. This is about choice. And the reason I say that is, believe it or not, and this is so hard for women to hear, we lead compartmental lives. And we never make the connection, or rarely make the connection, that if we're not advocating for women, we are we are really hurting our daughters' future. And so the men I've found who are advocates have that personal connection.
Well, I want to tell you something that one of the things that I tried my best not to address, because I just thought maybe it would be unprofessional, but I was a part of a CEO group, and every time, and I was the only female, and they wanted me in that group. And the reason they wanted me in the group was because I had a different thought process. Mm-hmm. So I thought I was welcomed in. And every time I would say something, I would watch them, or most of them, just ignore and move on. And so I did like you did. I did tally sheets. I love to see like what's going on. But one time they asked a question, and I gave my opinion, and the chair of the meeting said, uh-huh, and he moved along. The person next to me, it was almost as if he had recorded what I said in his voice, because he said the same exact thing, and the person in charge went, hang on, wait, say it slowly, I want to get it on the whiteboard. Yep. And I was holding on for dear life because I wasn't sure what was going to come on. And then I said, hold on a second. And then I explained what happened. He said, well, when that happens, you should let me know. I said, I am letting you know. And he said, so now am I supposed to walk on eggshells, was his response. And yeah. Two people in the room that were men said, that's not what she said at all, and not to walk on eggshells. Don't treat her differently than you treat us. And so Absolutely. you can see the advocates, and then and then you don't. But the other piece of that are the millennials. The millennials have never really seen the differences between men and women. They haven't seen it. They haven't experienced it. So how do you prepare them for that? You can't just say, okay, here's what you might see. Here's the 87 cents. Here's Ron, who's a sexist. Yeah. How do you know?
It's funny you bring that one up, because I get asked that question a lot. And I would love to tell you that the millennials are not carrying the baggage that their Xer and Boomer parents did. I just don't believe it. And my benchmark for this is, if you look at Silicon Valley, this is the epitome of young millennial culture. And oh, by the way, their diversity numbers are worse than most other industries. So being a millennial does not give you a pass on knowing how to leverage differences, not let alone understand them. And does that say women can't make it in Silicon Valley? Well, sure they can. But that, let's call it that frat boy culture, weeds out so many women in high school and so many women in college that, Yeah, if you're into that programming IT culture and a female or a person of color, yeah, you're welcomed in. But I don't believe millennials have this genderless gift that they uniquely understand how to leverage differences. And I'm going to tell you, the same training I'm doing for my peer group of old white guys totally needs to take place for all these other generations.
Agreed.
I want to change the gears a little bit. We've talked a lot about corporate.
Yep.
I remember in 2015, I was reading a report from a guy that has written more than 70 books on HR and the workplace and the future of workplace. The workplace, obviously, there's an evolution in the workplace. And he was saying in 2015 that by 2022, there's going to be such a lack of talent that there's going to be a lot of contractors working for corporations, any corporation, it doesn't matter what.
Yeah.
And if you read some statistics, the gender that is massively becoming an entrepreneur today is women. Mm-hmm. And I picture myself in all those entrepreneurs conferences that I've been attending for the last 5 years. And actually, I didn't realize that 90% were women, but actually 90% were women. So how is that? How do you see that equation? Because, companies have no choice. And as you very, very, very well described, they have not invested in those management levels. So right now there's going to be a gap. There's going to be a hole. Literally, there's going to be a hole. So they will have to go and, contract other people to do things that right now are part of the, let's say, of the bone employee body of the company.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think the workforce is going to shift, much like you said, just because it has to. But you still need a core of leadership, right? If you're a marketing company, you can't just count on agencies. If you're an IT company, you can't just count on contractors. And so I think it's twofold. How are you keeping your core talent? And it circles back to the women element. The number one reason women list for leaving companies is not money. It's not a bad boss. It's lack of flexibility. Mm-hmm. And the question is, why is my work schedule stuck in the 90s? I have an iPhone. We can talk face to face anytime you want. This notion of FaceTime equaling quality time, we have to get over. And you're going to continue to lose not just women, but millennials as well, because flexibility is just as important to them. And so how are you modeling that culture? And I think twofold. One, why are women starting more businesses? They want lifestyle. They're still doing the predominance of childcare. They're still doing the predominance of home care, regardless if they make more money. And so they're thriving and wanting flexibility. And so how do you give them that so that they don't leave? I heard the chief people officer for Deloitte give a talk recently. And Deloitte has gone to a voluntary leave program. And what that says is you can request up to 3 months off, no questions asked. Now think about that. You have to change the structure of how you're calling on people and your consultant base. But what was fascinating, and now realize, at their core, they're an old line accounting firm. And the CEO said, this is going to cost us a lot of money. And the chief people officer said, yes, it is. But it's the right thing to do. And within 2 months of implementing this woman independently got 3 letters from partner track women who were going to leave the company because they didn't feel comfortable asking to take time off. And oh, by the way, one of them had sister with cancer. One of them was adopting a child. One of them had aging parents. And so they were going to quit and go off the partner track as opposed to just even asking for time off. And what Deloitte will tell you is they actually believe this is now ROI positive because it has cut turnover so greatly. And oh, by the way, if your company offers that one time, aren't you going to be willing and committed to them forever? So that's how we've got to rethink this. And oh, by the way, everybody sitting out there is going, oh my God, how could we possibly do that? If it's important, you find a way.
Absolutely.
If it's important, you find a way.
Well, you say the word flexibility, and I totally agree that that's a big piece of it. And we did a study on a financial company, and a lot of people go into insurance and financial because of the flexibility. And so we asked, and all the managers were male, and we said, when you hear the word flexibility, what do you think of? And every man was in a different location, so nobody was together. Nobody could hear your opinions. Nobody could hear your answers. And every single one said, flexibility means they don't want to work as hard.
Right, which is crazy.
And I said that doesn't even come under any part of the definition, but that's what they said. They don't want to hire women who want some flexibility because it means they don't want to work as hard. And I said, did you ever think that maybe it was a single mom, which I was, that maybe wanted to go to their child's soccer game, which I did, and maybe that's what flexibility means. Maybe I can, go to a soccer game and pick up an appointment somewhere else.
Absolutely.
But that's not what they hear. When they are so stuck in their old ways, this is how we've always done it, they're not going to change. So you have to get the buy-in from the top or it's not going to happen.
Well, and what's so important about that, Judy, is not just having the policy, but monitoring and tracking. So a good example is even companies with great flex policies or paternity leave programs, people are afraid to take them because if I'm the only one, I will be ostracized or I'll be taken off the track. And so this notion of I think California just went to 16 weeks of paternity leave. Most women are afraid to be gone that long because it may affect their career status. So what companies need to do is monitor and track disparate impact and find out what's going on with the people who actually embrace this, number one. Number two, flexibility. If leaders really believe this, I have one simple thing, and they have to role model that behavior. And I have a phrase called leave loudly. And that says one day a week, maybe Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, walk down the hall and tell people to go home. Turn off the lights, look them in the eye and say, you can work, go home and do it. But this visual commitment makes it acceptable to do. And you're not, the one woman who needs to leave is not being ostracized. And this is, we talk about unconscious bias. This is a great place where this shows up, because if Angel leaves at 4:00 to coach his daughter's soccer game, he's seen as a great dad. If Judy leaves at 4:00 to take her sick daughter to the doctor, oh, she's just not committed. It's the same thing. And yet, how do leaders view that? Well, leaders have to model this. There's a great concept that I've seen companies adopting who really want to get good at this. And it's called core hours. And core hours says everybody's going to be butts in seats from 10 until 3 because we have to be collaborative. We have to be innovative. We know we have to get our people together. But quite frankly, I don't care if you work from 7 until 3 or 10 until 6. It doesn't matter to me. But how much would you love working for that company if they had a program like that? And it gets back to technology. I got an iPhone. I can talk face-to-face with any customer. I can send any staff meeting. And this gets back to millennials as well. Why are we having a staff meeting? What a complete waste of time most staff meetings are. And so there's so many good reasons to do it that, it's just silly to me.
I would like to ask you, Jeffrey, could you share with us maybe one story that a company was a little bit reluctant to bring more women to the forefront of their business strategy, and they did it, and you were involved, and some of the aha moments that you were able or they were able to discover while you were with them, tracking, monitoring all this process?
Yeah, you know, that's an interesting one because I often come in at various pulse points. You know, a lot of my work will involve a Fortune 100 company that's been at this for 20 years and they want to kickstart. Another company might just be launching an initiative. But I'll give you an example, and I don't. The proof is 6 years out, so I'm going to tell you. So I'm going to start with that, right? But I was doing work with a commercial real estate company, and the CEO identified they were losing female talent. Commercial real estate's a very relational business. You don't want to be turning talent, and so he called his 10 top leaders in. He split them into two groups of 5. Each had 4 men and a woman. And the staff folks, he said, go figure out internal retention. But the divisional presidents, the revenue drivers, he said, our customer base is changing. And we need to be more reflective of our customers. Go solve this. So these 4 men and a woman went away. And within 2 months, they came back with this document to the CEO. And they said, today, we're at 17% women in revenue producing roles. It will take us 7 years to get to 35%. And here are the 13 root cause issues we have to solve to meet that number. And what was brilliant about these men, and they had Gantt charts and scatter charts, and it was really almost an engineering type project. But these root cause issues, they didn't try and solve them. They merely put them down and then prioritized which ones they need to solve. So a big one was compensation. When you're the lead contractor on a project, you actually determine the compensation structure of the people underneath you. What they found out was women weren't being compensated at the same percentage as the men were on the team. So they're doing work to clean that up. Another one was just having more inclusive customer retreats. You know, this is an industry that still does a lot of golf, still does a lot of hunting trips and fishing trips. Well, they've changed this to say, you know, can we do more inclusive things? Can we do resort getaways or something to entertain our customers? And what was fascinating while I was actually doing this work, unbeknownst to them, another real estate company, Coca-Cola, my old employer, was moving 600 IT people 12 blocks in downtown Atlanta, right? This is a pretty big deal. And I was talking to the woman in charge of the move. And I said, so tell me about the process. And she said, well, you know, what's funny is there's 4 women leading this project for Coke. And the one commercial real estate company walked in with 4 men. And you could just look at these dynamics in the room and everybody knew it was wrong because it was so visual, right? And oh, by the way, that group did not end up getting the project, obviously. But it goes back to, do you really understand who your customers are, who your consumers are? And later there was a related HBR study that said you can't show up with a bunch of 42 longs and expect to be successful anymore. And so I think that's a company that has figured out what they're going to do. And by the way, Angel, they're holding people accountable for that 7-year plan. It's tied to their bonus. It's tied to their compensation. It's tied to regrettable losses. And so they're doing the hard work that has to be done. Are they going to get there? That was about 18 months ago. I know they've made some progress, but the story is yet to be written.
Awesome. We have to start wrapping it up. What an amazing conversation, Jeffrey. Jeffery Tobias Halter with, President of YWomen. Where can we find you online for everybody that is watching us today? How can we find you? How can we talk to you?
Yeah, thank you. Go to my website, www.theletterywomen.biz. And the reason I draw people there, I have a number of free tools that you can download. One is called a Gender Advocate Profile. It's a 20-question quiz that you can take, give it to your company. And the first 10 questions are around how you think about gender equity. And the next 10 questions are on the actions you take. And it's fascinating because women as well as men take this test and they score much higher on thinking about gender equity than actually taking action. There's another tool called Free Staff Meeting in a Box, Gender Conversation Quick Starters. I apologize, that's kind of a mouthful. But every 3 weeks, you receive in the mail, via email, a short white paper, something pulled from the news. We just recently used the Gillette ad, and 3 questions for you to hold a staff meeting to do the simple thing of talking about gender. And I list 3 questions, and it takes an hour, and no one has to prepare anything. And so those are 2 of the free tools that I offer. There's other white papers and things. So please go to my website. I have one simple goal in life, and that's to advance this conversation.
Awesome. Extraordinary. Thank you very much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
What a blessing. What an honor.
Thank you both.
Judy, again, how can we find Judy Hoberman? How can we talk to you?
You can find me anywhere on social media under Judy Hoberman, or Selling in a Skirt, or Walking on the Glass Floor. I'm everywhere, and I post every single day before 7 a.m. just because I feel like people are reading it. So, and what about you, Mr. Angel?
Thank you very much. Well, you can find me online as well, Angel Ribo, R-I-B as in boy O. Obviously, you can find me on Mindalia every day, and I'm very, very present on LinkedIn as well. I'm very active on LinkedIn. And you can, reach out to me easily on Angel@AngelRibo, again, R-I-B as in boy O.com. And thank you again, Judy, for being with us today, for bringing Jeffrey, amazing to have a conversation with you today. Yeah. Again, and this is Angel Ribo with Mindalia TV. Thank you very much for being with us today. I hope that you have enjoyed our conversation as much as we have here. You have a wonderful day, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Great. Thank you.